Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome to today's Technology Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the secretary to call the roll.
Yes, good afternoon. Chair Ted Yang,
Here.
Regent Sophia Jappanen, Regent Ari Santiago.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call for a vote to adopt the agenda.
I don't know if that's
Thank
a second or a motion, but either one I'll do.
Well, I'll make the motion, you can second it.
Perfect.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
And I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of the prior meeting previously sent and included in the notes for this meeting.
Hang on one sec. I think, hey, Ted, just give me 1 sec. I want to look at was there a revised
Yes.
agenda? Because there was just Karen, I think I mentioned to you that my attendance was missed on the last one.
I made the correction, and I believe I sent it back out.
I didn't see it, but I trust that happened. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'll make a motion to that. Anyone like to second to adopt those minutes?
I can second.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion? No. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are accepted. Okay, we have one item before we move to executive session. I think, Michael, if you wouldn't mind going to that.
Good afternoon, Regents. So this one item has a number of pieces to it, right? So it'll take a little bit of time. I want to walk through a series of documents that are included as part of the public session, but I'm going to go through them in an order that is not necessarily in the direct order of the materials that came out with the agenda. The first document I want to talk about is the document that's called the HERM. It's the HERM stands for the Higher Education Resource Model, and specifically there's a business capabilities model in that subset. And the reason I want to talk about this is that when we describe higher education, we often describe it as very complex, and most institutions describe themselves as unique. And while it's true that there are unique aspects of every institution, we're all in the same industry. We all have to meet many of the same accreditation standards, and we all have a very common set of practices. There's not a tiny set, it's a substantial set, but we all have them. And EDUCAUSE, which is the preeminent sort of IT body for higher education, it consists of people in higher education. It's got some permanent members, but it's mostly made up of people who are currently working in higher education. They commissioned this work, and they did this in concert with this external body, and this is international. So this is a description of the business capabilities and processes in higher education. I will call that internationally. If you add a little bit more information to it, mostly around financial aid, because that's US specific, that becomes the baseline of what Ellucian, who is our major partner for the Banner implementation projects, that becomes the baseline for which Ellucian does project work around. And in fact, what they do is they take that basic model and they work with the clients, which would be the various project teams, and they populate the specifics in the generic model, things like who is responsible for a certain business process as listed in the HERM. And that becomes what they consider the customer resource model. And that becomes a very specific, very actionable thing. And then they build the entirety of the project around that model. So that's the foundational underpinnings of any of the projects. So I wanted to make sure that we touch on this. Are there any questions about this model?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of questions about the model, but I think that I certainly have had some time given that I was away, to look at the model. It's not that different from prior ones that I've known from the finance industry, which is where I normally come from, and other more tech industries. So I don't have any questions at this moment, but I think that certainly for the sake of the broader audience here, if anyone is watching, and certainly for the broader board, we should prepare, or you should prepare, I'll ask you to prepare a longer write-up. I don't think it's necessary to do too much real-time presentation work, because I think this is something that takes more time to digest. But for people that want to drill into this, I think you could find either existing write-ups about this. Maybe Ellucian probably already has something there in terms of like 101 explaining the capability model that they would like to use and what that means for people. I think that would be very useful. But I don't personally have any questions at this time. But I leave it to Sophia and Ari to chime in.
Well, I'll just comment and give Sophia a chance to come off mute if she wants to. But I'll just comment that I think, having a broader kind of capability model that allows us sort of from the outside in to say, hey, what are all the different components of higher education? What are the sort of the different outcomes and processes we have to support that, and using that as the roadmap to support this Ellucian migration, I think is a great step forward. And the fact that we're using something that's sort of industry accepted, created by and for industry professionals, certainly something, again, to Ted's point, I've used this in other industries, but the same kind of concept seems to be very helpful from an IT project. And I know this will come up in other instances, I'm sure. And I think we've even talked about in previous technology committee meetings, but technology cannot be the end for itself, right? The banner implementation, the migration, all needs to be in support of our institutions, in support of our students, and helping them improve. And so I think starting from a model that says, hey, what are the pieces? Let's make sure we don't leave, no process left behind, if you will. I think this helps us in that regard. So glad to see it and appreciate you sharing it, Michael.
Great. Sophia?
I just want to just expand on what Ari is saying. I agree that having the full awareness of all the systems and how they interconnect will definitely serve us in the future. So I'm just agreeing with all on that one. Thank you.
Okay.
And I can certainly prepare a little bit more materials, not for discussion here, that I can provide a little bit more materials that'll be available.
Okay. I think that's perfect.
Okay. So the second thing I want to go through is the document that describes the banner modernization, which is what I would think of as the larger project. If you move down more towards the middle of the document, there are 5, for lack of a better word, there are 5 major elements that I think are representative of the banner modernization project. The first one of those elements is what we think of when we think of the each of the individual projects to move the existing banner cloud-hosted instance from a cloud-hosted to software as a service. I consider that a movement of movement of operations from one environment to the other, and there are 5 individual projects to move the 5 instances from cloud hosted to SaaS. I consider that the first major element of the totality of the banner modernization. In addition to that, which really is an operational focus, there are 4 other major elements. One of those is to standardize the environments with respect to across the CSCU, across the system. Currently, we have a high degree of variation. Some of that variation will be driven away because software as a service doesn't support the kind of variation we have in our instances. But there is still support for variation in software as a service. We want to drive as much of that variation, especially arbitrary variation. We want to drive that out. So a second element of the banner modernization project is exactly that, is to standardize internally, which would be standardized inside of Banner. Third element is essentially that same activity, but standardizing outside. The integrations are all outside of Banner, or it's all a relationship between Banner and something outside. And we want those integrations to be standardized as much as practical. For example, everybody's Banner, all the Banner instances have to integrate with Core CT. There's an integration with the Core CT for each one of the Banner instances. We don't want 5 unique Core CT integrations. We would want a single or a common integration between the Banner instances and Core CT, since the integration is from one system that should have a high degree of similarity to another, to a single system. So that's an example of that. So I consider that standardization of elements that are outside of Banner. In addition to that, we have another challenge, which is around enterprise reporting, or really reporting in general. Each of the projects that, when it migrates its operations from cloud hosted to SaaS, will have a reporting component. And that reporting component will absolutely be to serve the needs of its individual customers from where they were, which was cloud hosted, to then where they were going to end up, which is in SaaS. The individual projects by themselves do not have in there an element of synchronizing that across the various, call them projects individually, nor does it have an element that speaks to longitudinal reporting across the various tenants, as it were, at a system level. So this fourth element is specifically to accomplish that, right? It's the set of practices and it's the set of systems that we have in place today to do some of that longitudinal reporting. It's to replace that with something which leverages the existing investment in the tenants and adds the longitudinal component, standardizes what's in the tenants as well, but then adds the longitudinal component. That's the fourth element of the Banner modernization. And the fifth one is less defined, but it's an intention to allow for much greater access to data within the environments that people are operating within, much greater access to use it, much greater ability to leverage that data. I referred to that as democratization of data, but nonetheless, it's an important aspect of this. And it's important if we're going to extract full value from our investment in these major systems. We'll be talking about an aspect of this in executive session, but this component is a fifth major element, because as it stands today, the individual instances of Banner have not operated in this way. And so it's always been very ad hoc, and it hasn't been executed in a way that considered the system as a fundamental aspect of it. I mean, they were never asked to do that. Mostly this was an add-on, and we want to do this in a much more thoughtful way. So these are the 5 major elements of what we would describe as the larger Banner modernization project.
Okay.
Chairman, can I just comment briefly? Sure. Yeah. So, Michael, I think, from my perspective, having read the document, I think what's to me very helpful is us taking a step back and saying, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve from the IT project, kind of linking back to the prior comments. The goal of the IT project needs to be beyond the IT itself. It's what value is the organization going to get from it. And the 5 elements, I think, really outline that sort of beyond. Look, there are the nuts and bolts of the plumbing that got to get done, but that isn't the point unto itself. That being accomplished without the broader organizational benefit is not success. I think this document lays that out in a concise, clear way, understanding for non-IT people, maybe it's a little bit much, but we got to get some of the details in there. And I think you're striking a nice balance there. So what I would propose is some version of this, gets proposed Chairman Yang, either to the broader board chair for presentation at the broader board or something. Just, I think we need to connect this back up, and this gives us the ability to do that. So for your consideration, Chairman.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that having this framework is better. And again, I think that one of the things we need to be aware of is certainly from an Aleutian perspective, there is a success for this project that is not a success for us. But similarly, on each of the campuses, there is a success for each of the campuses that is not a success for the overall system. I think the major goals, as we've said before, we need to look at those goals of interoperability, data exchange, all these kinds of things across the entire system. That lack of data is one of the things that has been hamstringing us. Now, unfortunately, not many people do it really well in this industry, but unfortunately, the people who do it well are the privates, and so the who have lots of resource, right? And so certainly, as the largest public, here in the state and certainly in the region for our community college, we really need to nail this. And we need to make sure that we are really taking full advantage of that data and what goes forward here. I think that there may be, so certainly, Ari, I think that's a great idea for us to present this, for Michael to present this to the broader board in a summarized format at the whole board meeting. I think that this deserves a bigger audience. People need to understand that this is a critical project that is not a tech project, right? Like it is obviously a technology upgrade, technology migration, but this is a books and records system, right? This is as core as it gets, and we want to not just pull this off, but get the wins that we're looking for here. That's critical, and we need to make sure everyone understands that this board, certainly this committee, but I think this board stands ready to provide more resources and time if that's what we need. But we need to do it now. And really that awareness can only come if people are aligned. So thank you, Michael, for putting this together. Sophia, any comments?
No, I don't have any comments. Sorry about that.
All right, no worries. Okay, great. Michael?
So just before I move on to the next thing, because there's also more there's detail in the next thing. I think, from a level of detail perspective, my working model around this is going to be that the level of detail that we engage with here would likely be more specific than the level of detail that would be done at the full board level. So it would definitely be something which is a little bit simpler, a little more straightforward. With this committee, I'm going to err on the side of providing more transparency, and sometimes that will include additional detail.
100%. And I think the other way to do this is, the other way to reword this is that when you present that information, people want more information, please, they can reach out to myself, members of this committee, or yourself afterwards to get more detail. I think, less is a bit more, certainly for a big audience like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to jump in and say, I think sometimes words matter. Well, let me rephrase. Words always matter. And I think when we use the term, oh, we're going to provide more transparency here, it makes it seem like we're hiding something. I don't think that's the case. I think, there's only so much we can accomplish in the broader board, and we've been tasked with under the chairman's leadership here to provide additional technology oversight and report up to the board. So I think it makes a ton of sense to synthesize what we've got here, summarize it. And as Ted said, so I can stop calling him chairman, as Ted said, cool. As Ted said, if they have further questions, they can ask us. But we don't need to bring all the details there. And then just to make the comments I've made before, Michael, while I do appreciate the detail, I still want to keep us at an appropriate level and not,
Sure.
Number one, get snowed with too much information that we kind of can't make heads or tails of it, or two, get pulled too deep in the weeds where we really need to be at are we getting progress and accountability on the big picture objectives, relying on you and the team on the day-to-day.
Understood.
Okay. All right, Michael, next piece.
The last piece I'm intending here is to walk through the current status And this
Is it
is,
possible for you to just share your screen so that
oh,
as
do you want me to share it?
I just think just because there's a lot of numbers here, that way you can maybe just
Okay.
point with your cursor where you are so we can follow along. I think
Okay.
that would just be helpful.
Let me do this, share. Okay, is that being shared?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a document that's a work in progress. We're still continuing to refine it. Now, one of the things that has changed between our previous meeting and this meeting is I want to make a clarification that this particular status that we're looking at right here at the top, this status is the status for the first element of that BOR modernization project. This is the status of the migration of operations from client hosted to software as a service. So when we look at this and we say Southern is in the green on all these, it's saying that Southern is in that project at Southern at a high level for its these major elements is in the green for that migration. Okay, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be developing some detail around the other 4 elements, right? So this detail comes directly from the project teams, and it is available already. And so I'm making this available, and I will make additional detail available on the other elements as we develop. We're iterating around it now. There's a quickie at the bottom which I'll talk about, but this is the current status of the projects. Now, if you think of a project, each of the individual projects as taking place in phases, the first phase, which is an important phase, but the first phase is a very lengthy discovery process. And the reason it's a lengthy discovery process is that that model, that resource model has to be populated as it respects to the individual institution. And there's a substantial amount of work just populating that full model, and that's all done in the discovery portion. There's another substantial body of work which is in a very detailed look at every aspect of the operating system to identify everywhere that the system is not baseline, is deviates from baseline, and there's a tremendous amount of customizations around that. And when we look through those customizations, often there are customizations that are overcome by events, where an institution has a customization, they put a customization at one point in the past, the need for that customization went away, they never went back and removed it, and so it's another deviation from baseline, but not one that needs to be carried forward. And so there's a lot of assessment that gets done during the discovery portion of it. That's even internally. Externally, part of the discovery process is around the integrations. What integrations are in place? Which integrations need to be in place? All of that has to be done. And so the first 6 months of the 18-month project is dominated by all of that work. So when we say Southern is on schedule today, what we're saying is Southern is on schedule because they're just about at the end of their discovery portion of this. We're saying Southern is on schedule and they've completed all of the discovery work and populated all that discovery work for their migration. If you look down, we have an attempt here to add a running status, and these statuses are behind because they're conservative in nature. When they don't put an element as being complete until you actually get 100% complete on that element. And there are large chunks of the elements that are right at the end, like this week. There are discovery meetings finishing up for the other 3 projects. And just last week or next week, there's a major element to be delivered for Southern on this. And so when Ellucian reports on this, they're very conservative, and so it's always up to date or lagging in terms of the metric itself, the way it represents it. So this is why we could be a certain percentage of project complete within this status and be green when we're saying we're close to the end of the 6 month period. It's because of the way they track it. But that's why we want to be able to show what they say with respect to the percentage complete, because we're trying to get them to also go to the different phases of their projects and give us completion timelines on those as well. It isn't the way they normally track it, but it's a way that helps us understand that we are on track. And on track early, as opposed to only knowing if we're on track when we get to the very end. We want clarity throughout.
Okay.
This is an example of one of the sort of breakdowns as they start to add more detail. This has got a lot of stuff removed from, but the challenge is when we move to the detail comes in really fast. Lots of detail comes in really quickly, and it's not particularly usable as such. So we're trying to get to the right level of display. This is too detailed. I just wanted you to this is the readily available next level of detail, still too detailed.
Okay.
And I wanted to say that we do have a report on at least 2 of the remaining 4 sort of major elements. And when I say that there's a report on them, it's because those elements, at least 3 of them, rely heavily on what gets produced in the migration projects themselves. For example, when we can't rationalize or normalize internal consistency without discovery. So discovery is an important part of that process. And while doing that across the projects is a major element of the whole modernization project, it is beholding to discovery coming out of each of the actual migrations themselves. So those major elements are tied to, or they are downstream from selected or certain portions of the existing migrations. And so that's why we can make a reference here on these 2. One is the integrations, and one is I'll call them the standardization or the deviation from baseline, the customizations component, because this is information that directly comes out of the discovery portion of the projects, making them consistent across the projects. We just had the kickoff meeting. Was it not? It was 2 weeks ago, around this with the existing projects to clarify what we're looking at, what we're trying to standardize, and how the projects have to interface with that. That kickoff meeting just happened 2 weeks ago. And so to a certain extent, what I would say, if I was asked to report 3 weeks ago on the status of those elements, they would all be 0, because that was the very beginning of that element. It was just 2 weeks ago. It was the actual kickoff, right? So this is just right now a placeholder, because we haven't finished iterating around how we're going to do the reporting on those other elements.
Okay.
And I will add, the one caveat is the democratization of data is probably the hardest to report on. It is the one that's least tied to the existing projects, and it's also the one where that has that's the most open-ended in terms of what it's going to accomplish.
Okay.
Well, that's why we have you in charge and Big Brain Michael on coming up with how we track the difficult to track. So, right man for the job. Well,
Awesome. Okay. Anyone have any further comments on this? No? Okay, well, thank you, Michael. And I think that does it for our primary agenda. So, before I call for a motion to move to executive session, let me state the members of the committee move to executive session in accordance with 1-200 subsection 6E of the general statutes for the purposes of discussing information technology security not otherwise required by 1-210 of the general statutes. No votes will be taken in executive session. Technology committee will not reconvene following executive session. There will be no votes taken in executive session. The only remaining item will be to adjourn the meeting. Only the regents will be in attendance during the executive session, with the exception of the assistants that should be called upon by the chief information officer, who I will ask to join us, as he may have testimony or opinion that is pertinent to the matter being discussed. Therefore, allow me to call for a motion to move to executive session for the purposes that I have described above.
So moved.
Thank you. Can I second, Sophia?
Yeah, second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. All right. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Ben, please terminate the live stream.
Okay, stream is stopped. Thank you, folks.